song and dance going on.
Time out, first of all.
Cue sunset.
I mean, we're like running around. This
Darren
is fantastic.
special ordered that for me.
I know. Thank you for making the trip, by the way.
Thanks, brother.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, proper introduction for Kevin Zinger. He is the soul behind the spade.
That's right.
Of SRH and the soul and soul owner of Suburban Noize Records, which we'll get into in a little bit. I kind of like to go back to the beginning, early on. You grew up in San Diego.
Grew up in San Diego. Going all the way back to the beginning, I was about 18 years old, living in Mission Beach. My partner, who's still my partner in SRH, was doing a nightclub, and so he was doing a little nightclub up the street. He invited me over there, and he said, "Hey, come check it out." A mutual friend was living with him at the time, and he was like, "Come check out my club," and I went, and it was cool. It was in a great spot, but there wasn't really that many people there. And he was like, "Would you be interested in partnering up with me on this club?" And I was like, "Well, first of all, you had to sneak me in to fucking even come the first night, because I wasn't even 21. I was 18 or 19 at the time." And I was like, "Can you pull it off with the owners?" And he was like, "Yeah, I can pull it off with the owners." And I was like, "Cool, yeah, I'd totally be into that. But give me 2 or 3 weeks. Let me find a good band and really try to promote it correctly." So next thing I know, fast forward a couple months later, the club's at full tilt. We were jamming 1,200 people in this club every week. This is
What were some of those early artists?
Pennywise, Sublime, 311, Offspring. I mean, you name it. This is before any of them went on to sell platinum records.
This is
late
80s, early 90s.
I was hip to a lot of that music, the NoFX's and all that stuff through the surf and skate culture, because that's where I grew up in. So, it wasn't like we sat down and came up with a game plan of this is what we're going to do and this is how we're going to launch SRH clothing or anything like that. It was just, we were so a part of that culture already.
Well, it's in a sense, and Rush should jump in here, for those that don't know SRH, for those outside that realm, it's a lifestyle brand. It's a lifestyle in the world of, in the way that hip hop would be. I think that where it's, when you talk about whether it's, stoners or surfers or skaters or snowboarders wreaking havoc, it's like that whole lifestyle, and that's the spade, that's the look. So this all blended nicely with what you were doing with music.
We started doing these clubs, and all of a sudden, I was 18, 19 years old. I was a sponsored surfer at the time, and, we went from doing one night a week to all of a sudden we were doing 5 or 6 nights a week. I mean, I wasn't even old enough to get in the club. The next thing you know, everything, the fun parts of rock and roll, the girls, the booze,
drugs,
everything that comes,
the late nights.
Yeah, the late nights, the whole showing up to a contest at Saturday morning at 6 o'clock to surf, when I'm walking out of a club, I just booked my favorite band, girls, all the things that come with it. Waking up at 6 in the morning to go try to compete, to try to get to a final, to maybe win $500 or $700 just wasn't that appealing anymore,
Right,
so
I get you.
Eventually what happened was we were doing so many nightclubs and doing so many concerts, and we really became we tagged everything SRH, and people, like I said, it was before all these bands became popular, but we branded it well enough where people saw SRH Presents and it was a certain thing. I grew up in Southern California. I was born and raised here, so it's just part of my DNA. So people knew that if SRH was throwing a show, the band would fit a certain lane or a certain vibe, and there would be, it was that thing. And eventually, a few years into it, it wasn't even a few years, probably a year and a half into it, my clothing sponsor at the time dropped me. That was Gotcha Clothing. Long story short, Gotcha dropped me as a sponsor, surfer, and I went to my partner at SRH and I was like, look, I'm going to take the money from doing these nightclubs and I want to start my own clothing line. Mm-hmm. Let's do this, and he gave me the shot at doing the club and first break, and he was like, yeah, I'll do it with you. Mm-hmm. And 20 years later, he's still my partner, so that's a good testament to the SRH thing and the bond that we've had. But slowly but surely we started to take the money that we were making from clubs and investing it into this clothing brand.
So as artists were starting to brand their own gear, you were just stamping it
No, we started, basically what happened was we were like, I got dropped by Gotcha. I said, let's take the money from the from the concerts that we're throwing and put it into a clothing company. And we just started by making a couple of t-shirts and a bunch of hats, found an embroidery company and made a bunch of stuff. And we started handing it out to, like, you know, our friends who were pro skaters, bands, and the next thing you know,
getting the name out there.
Yeah, we were just getting the name out there, and we all of a sudden we had this huge, like, sort of cult following in Southern California. You know, I mean, everybody from, I mean, you name it back then, all the bands were rocking it, right?
Yeah.
And it was a special time period for music and Southern California lifestyle. And, you know, we didn't have any big investors. We didn't have anything. I mean, it was so grassroots that, I mean, I can remember when we did our first cut and sew piece. It was, I took a flannel that I liked and a pair of shorts that I liked, and I took it to a sew house, and I was like, okay, this is what I want changed, and we cut it all out, and I made the templates, and then I drove to downtown LA to go get the material. Yeah. I brought rolls of flannel and rolls of denim, and I brought it back to the sew house. I went on the fake it till you make it program and just tried to figure it out along the way.
When did Suburban Noize come out of all that?
Basically, what happened was we started doing so many shows, and the clothing company started doing really, really well around 94, 95. And what we would do, Interscope came to us, and we put out our first compilation. Interscope came to us and was like, you know, they wanted me to, I knew somebody over there that was actually running the place at the time. They wanted me to drive up to a meeting as an A&R source in San Diego. And that whole I was on the DIY, punk rock, like, I was like, what? I'm not driving to Hollywood and doing it. But anyways, I went up and did this meeting. And they were like, will you put together a compilation? And on that original compilation, I mean, it was Offspring, it was Pennywise, it was all the bands that were
it's like a who's who of, like, SoCal rock in
that
era.
Before it actually blew up, right? And that was our first record that we ever put out. In the same time period, there was a band called Sprung Monkey from San Diego, and I was still super good friends with those guys. Sprung Monkey came to me and was like, you know, you're one of our better friends. We trust you. You're a good business guy. Will you manage us? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I love that band. And so that was sort of my first entree into the management side of things. And that first compilation I did through Interscope was sort of the first entree into actually putting out a record. And then eventually that morphed into Suburban Noize. Cottonmouth Kings was a Southern California lifestyle band. We put them on all the biggest shows that we had at SRH and basically tried to blow them up through that, and they ended up getting a deal. And then I partnered up with Brad in 97 on Suburban Noize.
How would you describe Cottonmouth Kings?
Cottonmouth Kings, I mean, look, like, for all the ups and downs that we've had in the last 4 years, I'm still very proud of what we accomplished. I mean, they were a small band that we made huge worldwide name, and you know what's happened in the last few years has been an interesting ride for their legacy, but they're still a huge part of Southern California subculture for sure.
Right. Well, we're on it. Let's talk about it. I mean, it's for those, again, kind of bringing in some of the context of what's going on. I don't think that you can go through 20 years in the music or in the fashion business without some sort of legal interaction, right? Some sort of...
well, that was my first one, yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
I want you to kind of explain it how you feel comfortable from your standpoint, because for those fans that are out there that know the Suburban Noize, the SRH, the Cottonmouth Kings world, they know Brad X as being kind of your counterpart to all that. But that's not the case anymore.
That is not the case anymore.
Right. Again, you tell the story, but how did it come to be?
It came to be, look, when a band has as long as a run as the Cottonmouth King, and once again, I mean, I was there from the beginning. Literally, those guys were sleeping on my couch in San Diego, and Brad and I were, you know, putting money in to make the first records and all that stuff, basically getting off the... But when you go through basically 15 years with somebody, people change. They just do. You know what I mean? And through the ups and downs of it, I hung in there as long as I possibly could, literally, because, you know, what we created with, and when I say we, I don't mean just Brad and I mean, there were a
lot of people involved.
You know, for people that worked in the building to the fans. I mean, we really built like a whole subculture around this thing. You know what I mean? And it was bigger than any brand or bigger than any band. You know? When we started selling stuff to like Zoomies and Tillies and stuff like that, like, can you imagine like walking in there and showing the, you know, Stoners Wreaking Havoc line to like corporate people in the Midwest?
I mean, I would say, because like from a parental standpoint, I would say from like a content standpoint, from like a content, you know, lyrical message, that was on the same level with Cottonmouth Kings as it was with like gangster rap.
Yeah.
It's like your parents did not, there were lists of shit that you could not listen to, and those guys and, you know, their counterparts were part of that.
Oh yeah.
All right, so you and Brad, you're battling it out years and years, and
I mean, we were on the grind for 15 years, and towards the end, I would say probably the last 3 or 4 years, you know, we were partners in a business together, and I managed a band, his band. And, you know, when I say it was us that created this whole movement, like, I mean, there really was, I mean, you're talking about people with logos tattooed on them, and you know what I mean? Like, it was a huge thing. And to me, what we set out to create, it just, towards the end, it just didn't feel right. And as much as I tried to put it back on track, I mean, with, you know, internal fighting and, you know, when money comes into play, things get weird. That's just the reality, you know what I mean? And for me, you know, I mean, I've got a bad case of ADD, so I have multiple businesses, and so, you know, anyways, long story short, when money comes into play, things get a little weird. Towards the end of the run, I just had enough, man. It was just like, it just didn't feel right anymore. It just
what were those like main like differences that you guys really like ground on?
Well, one was really like, we owned a record label together, and I felt like, you know, I was doing 99% of the work with the other bands that were signed to the label, you know what I mean? And like, you know, I was in there, you know, I mean, Brad probably came in the office twice a year, you know what I mean? So I was in there grinding. And that wasn't even my problem. It was like, it was more of like the internal stuff within their own group, you know what I mean? It was like,
they had their own drama.
Yeah, they had their own drama with each other, and, you know, it was all, I was always trying to be the voice of reason and trying to show everybody else the other side's perspective, but you can only do that for so long if it's, you know, the definition of insanity, trying to do the same thing over and over again, and, you know,
getting the same result.
Yeah, expecting a different result.
Right.
So anyways, long story short, I basically just said, look, I don't want to manage the band anymore. I'm just, wish everybody the best of luck and resign and blah, blah. Just, you know, we still own the label together. We're still brothers. It just doesn't make sense anymore for me to manage the band. You know, it wasn't a monetary thing, because obviously, you know, the band still made money, so it wasn't, I was just walking away from it as far as me entrenched in your day-to-day life as your manager. After 15 years, it might be time.
Just trying to cut the cord.
Yeah, it might be time to do something different, you know?
Yeah.
And long story...
You didn't take to it.
No, it didn't really work out too well.
But you weren't, at that point, you weren't implying, like, business-wise.
No, not
you
at
were
all.
just saying, from a professional standpoint.
Literally, it was, let's get together and talk about Suburban Noize and how to move forward, because I still wanted to obviously put out Cottonmouth Kings records, and I still wanted to be involved in the Cottonmouth Kings business, because, you know, I mean, I helped build it for 15 years. I just didn't want to deal with the daily grind minutiaes of the internal dramas and all of those kind of things. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to take a step back.
Creatively, you guys were like, did you share art, like, hey, I'm thinking about this artist, I like these guys, or was he out of that from an A&R standpoint?
From an A&R standpoint, the last sort of like 7 years, he didn't play much of a role. In the early days, he did.
Okay.
Yeah. But, you know, he moved far away, and he just didn't play a really day-to-day role in Suburban Noize. So yeah, anyways, long story short, I basically resigned as managing the band. I was sitting in my office on, I think it was like a Thursday night at like 6 o'clock, and I was like, look, we were supposed to get together at 7 for a dinner meeting, right, to discuss how to move forward and discuss what to do. And I don't know if it was 5 or 6 o'clock, I got a email from him saying, hey, I'm not showing up to dinner, and 15 minutes later, I got a letter from a very powerful law firm threatening to sue me for every other business, including our own shared business. So, I mean, I own, they went after Battle Axe, another label I own, SRH, my management company. I mean, it was basically like, and I couldn't believe it. I mean,
under what grounds? Like, what was the?
In America, what I've learned is you can sue anybody for anything.
You can come up with anything you want.
Yeah.
But was there like an umbrella? Was it? He was claiming rights, or he was claiming?
It was kind of bizarre because we could never really figure that out. You know what I mean? It drug on for quite a long time. We could never really figure out like, what is your claim here? Like, what are you really saying? You know what I mean? Like, he obviously never showed up for the dinner. I reached out, God, a dozen times, just saying like,
let's talk it out.
Yeah, I mean, this is somebody who was my brother. You know what I mean? I would have done anything for him. Like, he was
once
all
lawyers,
those guys.
Your friendship's off when lawyers get involved.
Yeah, but it was weird. Like, I just was like, let's just sit down man to man. Like, what is this? Like, what, and the thing is when lawyers get involved, they can really sort of spin things. You know what I mean? And I think he went so down a path that he just couldn't get off that path, if that makes any sense. And he couldn't, there was no way to like sit down with me and have a real conversation at that point, because I think at some point he realized like, this is bullshit. You know what I mean? Like,
no, and I think a lot of people, I think that there's a lot of like legal remorse. You know what I mean? It is kind of, it's like the buyer's remorse. It's like, I'm gonna do it. I'm fired up, and then 2 weeks go down the road, like, wow, I just threw out 15, 20 plus years, whether it's a marriage, whether it's a business deal, whatever. It's like you just changed the course of history and future.
Yeah, and for me, like, there was a lot of things that were in play, and the two most important were like, look, we own this business together, right? Like, forget about credit, forget about who did what, forget about all that stuff. Like, you've got a family, the guys all have families, right? Like, let's get together and figure this thing out, and not just for the business side of things, but also for the legacy, because it's like that. I mean, the last 4 years,
it messes
just
with
like,
the history.
I mean, it just, it was such a thing to be proud of, and now it's just like, I mean, I'm still very proud of it, but it just, you look back at it, and it's like, you know what I mean?
And fans don't want to like remember a soap opera,
right?
You know what I mean? They don't want to remember band drama, label drama, management, business. They don't want to. And they just want to remember good music, good times. So it's like,
well, people are trying to escape from that. They're not trying to get involved.
They got their own legal issues.
And like, and they, and for some reason, Brad decided to take a tact where it was very like, because the case was such crap, I think that's why he made it so public, to try to like, once again, we haven't literally sat face to face, man to man in 3 years. I've literally tried to do that so many times.
So that dinner, that whole thing started 3 years ago, and I know from talking to you, it all wrapped up like a matter of a few months ago, right?
Yeah, it wrapped up. Well, that was the crazy thing. It wrapped up in July of last year, but every time we would wrap it up, they would try to say, "Oh, no, that's not what we wrapped up." I was like, it's in black and white. Like, that was the thing, is like, you get a lawyer and you pay him $500 an hour, they'll argue that, they'll argue whatever, and
So in layman's terms, if I could, it's basically Brad comes to you and says, I want this, this, and this, and then obviously you're saying that's not the case, and we need to...
Well, out of principle, look, if I owe somebody $1 on the other side of the world, I'll get in a plane and go get them their dollar, right? But out of principle, if you threaten me with lawsuits and lawyers and all of these things, what's right is right. You know what I mean? Like, I'll spend more money to fight you to come out on the other side right than to just like, a lot of people just settle the case.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that just wasn't the tack that I was willing to do. I'm not just going to give somebody
when you're smart enough to know that your pride's not in the way, your ego's not in the way, and what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong.
Yeah, I mean,
and was it over naming and copyright and masters? I mean, did it go, or was it just the basic black and white of what he wanted versus?
He wanted money from my businesses.
Yeah, that had nothing to do with Suburban Noize.
Nothing to do. I mean, it was very clear. We made an arrangement. We were business partners in Suburban Noize.
Right. That was it.
I owned SRH before I met him. I managed bands before I met him. I had all these things before I met him. We made a deal to put out records together as Suburban Noize. I mean, it got so stupid. I mean, he sued Madchild from Battle Axe, my partner in Battle Axe Records.
He's been over here.
Yeah. Let's just put it this way. You can sue anybody for anything in America. It doesn't mean you're going to win and come out on top. It's just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
God bless America. Right. Kevin...
And look, at the end of the day, I want them to go reinvent themselves. I want them to go be successful.
Yeah.
Go do your thing. It only became me against them because they made it that way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? All I wanted to do was just move on with my life, which I did 3 years ago as soon as that letter showed up. You know what I mean? I was heartbroken. I was bummed out. I was questioning, who my friends were, all of those kind of things that anybody goes through. But looking back at it now, it was a valuable life lesson, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm past it. I moved on with my life. I've got so much other things going. That's so in my rearview mirror. I will go be successful.
Yeah.
Go, for the legacy of everything that we all built, the fans, the band, the people that worked on it. I hope they go on and be successful and can sort of smudge out this sort of hiccup in the road.
Yeah, I think everything, I think everything blows over. So let's get into other stuff, Kevin Zinger. By the way, I just was thinking, Adela, show this little setup right here, this little table. This was where I did about a year ago, my first show. Right, so this is like my 1 year anniversary. Speaking of anniversaries, I had Mikkel from the Airborne Toxic event. I had one camera set on a tripod.
That's set one. This is set two.
Set two. What do you think? I want to ask you a little bit about music and artists, and you take some of these bands that we just rattled off earlier, Unwritten Law, Pennywise, Offspring, names that have etched in stone in SoCal music lore. What do you think it is about them? Because their sound doesn't really change, but what do you think it is about them that keeps them around? And not just them, but just a strong brand in general.
I really think that with all the bands that you mentioned, they built up real core audiences that were fans and part of it, and that will always stand the test of time. You know what I mean?
You think a strong fan base is more than
yes.
a rash of smash singles?
Yes, for the long term, right? Yeah. Because you can write one great song for the moment, and that's all it is. It's one great song for the moment. But if you write a great record that stands the test of time, you're going to have fans for the rest of your life.
Yep.
And that's what I've done my whole career. I've tried to, a lot of people. It's weird because in the clothing business, people know me as the music guy. In the music business, people know me as the clothing guy. And because I've been in both worlds, you know what I mean? But, for me, it's I try to find things that I like building businesses, whether that's a band or a brand or whatever it is. I like seeing
the process
things,
of that, how it develops.
It's it's
like
I don't want to sound cliche. Yeah, there's sort of the long haul in the music business, and what I always tell people, when a band's going in to make a record, I'm look, you can go in there and you can sit all day long trying to come up with a hit, but you can't contrive a hit song, right? Or you can't contrive, clearly you can contrive a hit song. I take that earlier statement back. You can't contrive...
Where's the pop charts? I'll show you a list.
A hit song that stands the test of time.
Yeah.
Right? So it's those...
Few of those a year come out.
Right. And the ones that stand the test of time, and all those ones come naturally, right?
Yeah.
So it's just... Don't try to make a record for anybody but yourself, and just make the best record that you want and you think your fans want. And somewhere in there, that's what makes great music and what stands the test of time.
Well, where do you... Okay, so we've... your evolution of Suburban Noize and SRH 20 years in, like, do you want this? Do you see this extending into, like, 40 years? Do you want to, like... be the guy that takes a phone call for 5 minutes and answers 20 questions in 20 years from now while somebody runs your company? Or do you want to, what do you want to do?
I mean, I struggle with that all the time because, I've been doing this since I was 18 years old. So I've been doing it for 20 plus years. And, I work very hard. I pride myself on outworking most of the people in this town, and I put in 12-hour days and all that good stuff. But it's just part of my DNA, and it's a great feeling when you get to see something come to life. Like right now, like with the Battle Axe thing that Madchild and I are working on. Like, like we put this thing out. Obviously, Madchild had a huge career with Swollen Members, but never really did a solo record. We never really did that, and just started experimenting with it 4 years ago, and now he's got this whole movement and this whole lifestyle built around it, and he's definitely a visionary, and he ran his own business for a long time with his own label, and he understands that he needs people like myself and the team around him to sort of like get that vision out to the world and really make it bigger than what he can do on his own, and he's done a great job, and it's exciting to see that whole thing blossom into what it's becoming, and I think we're really, really right on the sort of the front end of what the possibilities are with Battle Axe. But I mean, the management company, I mean, we work with, such a diverse group of, not only managers but artists. It's, we manage everything from, Black Uhuru to Pancho Sanchez, the Latin Grammy, jazz to rock bands to hip hop groups,
dirt bike,
dilated peoples.
But you also work with like the action sport. Are you still doing some of that?
Yeah, I still do a bit of that. I manage Risk, who's like one of the most famous graffiti writers out there in the world, but a fine artist. So I'm getting into the art world. I mean, just all over the place.
Yeah.
Slane, who does, acting
yeah.
to music to everything in between. So, I truly enjoy what I do every day, and I enjoy the people that I work with. So, to answer the question, do I see myself doing this for another 20 years? Probably not, but another 10, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and now you got the film on tap.
Yeah.
That film sounds... You were just telling me the other night. Can you give a little rundown?
Yeah, it's a movie.
You're filming this summer.
Filming this summer. It's loosely based around some things and scenarios that happened. So I handed it to some people I trusted to read the script, and they're honest people, so they would tell me if it was shit. And they all came back to me and they were like, "No, man, it's good." I was like, "All right, I might have something here." So once that happened, I started putting it out to a few sort of industry people to give it a read, and it's sort of taken on a life of its own. And now, I've got a bunch of different people in town trying to want to make it bigger, and talk to this distributor, this studio, blah blah blah. But to be honest with you, I think I'm just, I've done everything myself for this long. I think I'm just going to fund it and do it. I don't want people changing the storyline. It's got a very tragic ending. Oop, I just gave away the ending, but it's got kind of sort of tragic ending. So I don't want it to be like, oh, and then they go off.
The butler did it.
Yeah, I can't. I've never done anything corny and cliche, so or at least I don't think I have. But I don't want to start now.
I'm available for the extra role.
Yeah.
So when you need the filming,
right?
Tough
guy number 6, Darren Rose,
exactly. In the back. A couple of things I want to talk about before I let you take the cruise on back up to Malibu. Your dad does some really interesting stuff.
My dad is the man.
Your dad is a fascinating character.
My dad is the man. He's probably part of the reason why I guess I'm motivated. But yeah, my dad is he's 73 years old. He swims 3 miles a day.
And how long has he been keeping that up for? Years?
For ages. Yeah, he did like.
And this is in the ocean. This isn't like going down the Y.
Yeah, no. He's not swimming back and forth in laps and pools. I mean, he was the oldest guy to ever do the Alcatraz swim, and that's this. Literally, they jump off the Alcatraz and swim across the San Francisco Bay, and he did it with no fins, no wetsuit, no anything. And he was the oldest guy to ever do it. Yeah, and hundreds of people jump in the water to try to make it, and literally, a dozen or so make it across, and he was one of the guys that made it. So I mean, he rides Harleys. He's 73. I'm like, dude, you got to get rid of the Harley. But
I think one of the things that's worth mentioning is he harnesses the power of hypnosis.
Yeah.
Which I've always been fascinated by.
That's what he. Nowadays hypnosis doesn't have sort of like that stigma that it did when he first got into it. But
hippie. He was kind of new wave.
People
hippie.
kind of rolled their eyes when you said hypnosis in the 80s and even in the 90s. But now people have and all hypnosis is just your.
But this is different. But this is different than going to a bachelor party and you're Elvis.
No, he's not doing that. Yeah. He would go into bigger corporations and stuff like that, and basically using hypnosis to sort of enhance your daily routine, enhance everything in your life, from your relationships to your workflow to everything. So when I was 7 years old, my dad hypnotized me. This is a true story. I got the pictures to prove it. And he basically, I was 7 years old. He made me flat like this, and he put my head on one chair, nothing underneath me here, and my feet on the other chair like that. And I was basically like that, right? And then and everybody in the crowd is like, "Whoa, how do you do that?" And then my dad literally got up and stood in the middle of me.
No.
Yeah.
Had you guys done that before?
No. And we haven't done it since.
But you just had faith in the fact that...
Yeah, I mean, he was working with me when I was younger, and I've been exposed to hypnosis for a long time. But, yeah, he was just like, you're very acceptable to it. Because in hypnosis, when you see these, horny things, oh, jump around like a chicken, the person knows they're jumping around like a chicken. It's not
You think so? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. People know what they're doing. It's not just oh, I'm under some spell or something like that, right? It's just, you're just more open to suggestion. It's the story of
mass mentality.
No, you hear those stories about the grandma who picks the car off the kid or something like that.
Right.
You're able to do these things when your adrenaline is flowing and your mindset is right and all of those kind of things, and that's what hypnosis gets you into the state to be able to do those things.
It's cool. It's deep shit.
You like that, huh? My dad is the man for sure.
He is.
He's an interesting character.
Well, let's wrap up on radio. I mean, I that's how we met, and that's how I know that's one of the things that has evolved probably the most since. I mean, we're about the same age and kind of coming up, listening to the radio, and when the CDs came out, or remember, we've kind of lived in that era. We're the last of that generation that's lived in that era. I've seen vinyl, cassettes, CDs, MP3s. Now,
I remember 8-track.
Yeah, and now shit in the cloud. So it's what do you think? I don't know. Do you feel
I don't think radio's going anywhere.
No. I don't think. And I didn't mean I meant more in terms of for you as a company that's been around, basically with the same brand, the same idealism since before all that. What do you think? Is that magic secret sauce to be able to battle through all those changes?
Everything that I've done in the music business, if we got radio, was just the cherry on top, right? Or the extra little something. But I've never sat down with any band and said, okay, this is the radio smash. We're going to radio and we're going. It's just not really. And you have to have everything else, and then if you get radio, that's great. On the format itself, I think radio is actually getting a bit better, to be honest with you. I think in the last, and I don't mean necessarily normal terrestrial radio, but in the last decade, with Sirius and podcasts and all those things, there's more ways to access different voices. You know what I mean? It's not the same sort of just program thing. I mean, I encouraged the people that I worked with. I said, let's just switch it up. Like, after your set, go out there, go hang out with them. And that's what builds the sense of community. Yeah. So I think that applies in media as well. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, earlier I talked more about the Suburban Noize drama than I've talked about in 3 years. And that's because there's a trust that's there. You're a good interviewer. You know what I mean? It's like, right. And people like Joe Rogan. I mean, Howard Stern in the early days, that's what he was great at. You know what I mean? I mean, he still is. I just don't listen to him anymore, but I'm sure he's great at it. But he can pull things out of people, and people appreciate that honesty. People appreciate that insight and that, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I can remember when the Napster thing happened and everybody was, you know, freaking out. It was the end of I got into the music business right when Napster was happening, and then, like, you know, that was supposedly before that were like the glory days of the music business, where everybody made tons of money and it was this big glamorous thing. But I did it because I loved music, right? So when the Napster thing happened, it was like, great. I was like, there's nothing I can do about that, so embrace it. You know what I mean? Like, you
were probably downloading as many songs as I was. You know, it's like, and
you learned about how many new artists, and you know what I mean. And my thing was always like, and I tried to say that to, you know, people back then, was like, you know, if they don't buy the CD, they're going to buy a concert ticket. They're going to buy a T-shirt.
Exactly. They're going to tell a friend.
Yeah. I mean, the whole 360 deal that's out there right now. I mean, I was doing the 360 deal before that phrase even came up, and it was not because, like, I consider myself a visionary or anything like that. It was like, I could do a better job at making merch for my band than a merch company could. I could get my bands on the road just as easy as, you know what I mean? So it was I just did it all. Rhymesayers is a great boutique, perfect example of a well-run label. And I mean, those dudes aren't even they're not in Hollywood. They're not in New York. They're in fucking Minnesota.
Exactly.
Travis, who's a good friend of mine who runs Strange Music, Tech Nine, all that stuff, I mean, he's in Kansas City. You know what I mean? So the internet has definitely made the world smaller, and it's given people that true ability to take their entrepreneurial spirit and apply it to the entertainment world. So that applies not only to labels, but radio, media. There's no way 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I could sit here and go, I'm going to make a movie this summer, because the lines of distribution were just cut off. Right. It was either make money in the theater and sell DVDs, right? So if you didn't make money in the theaters or DVDs, your movie wasn't going to come out. Nobody was going to fund it, or nobody was even going to put it out. Now there's Netflix, and I mean, there's Amazon. So many ways to get content out there, and good stuff always comes up. It's, you know what I mean? It's like, there's good stuff, the cream always rises to the top, or whatever cliche saying you want to do. But the internet has definitely made the world smaller, and it's empowered entrepreneurs to be able to put out good content.
Yeah. So you got SRH.com, Suburban Noize, all the
SuburbanNoizeRecords.com, SRH.com, Scratch and Sniff, Battle Axe Records, Regime Inc. for the management company.
You can pause and rewind it and get all those down.
Or just go start a company and put out good content.
Exactly. Listen to what he does. Thanks, Darren Rose, MusicNetwork.com. It's fun, man.
Cool.
It's great. Good shit.
I wasn't going to take my sunglasses off mid-interview.
No, I know. You got to...